All right, let's look at how we fit a horse. You know, there's three areas we're going to concern ourselves. The front, then we'll look at the top, then we'll look at the bottom. That pretty much encompasses all the way around the edge of the pads. Remember, our objective is to make these neoprene pads touch the horse all along the length of the bars. If there's a void, we'll fill it with a space just the size of that void. It's really not as difficult as it sounds. This horse is a thinner type horse. So when we put the pads on with the standard 3/4 inch pads, we see that we've got a little excessive width here. This is just too wide for this horse. If the saddle doesn't fit properly here, it just won't stay in place. There's nothing to keep it from riding forward, and the movement can induce soreness, and of course we lose support here, and an important part of the overall support of the saddle. Here's the horse's scapula. We should be positioned just over the back of it. We don't want to be pinching the scapula, but this is too wide. Let's look at thicker pads. When you're fitting a horse, put a little weight on it. Now I've got this gap down to just about 1/8 of an inch. I can easily put my fingers in, and I'm happy with this. If you see a small crack like this, don't worry about that. That really is just making allowance for your pad, so your pad won't be lifting it up off the horse, and your saddle pad will fill that in without making it too tight. So this is going to leave the shoulder plenty of room to move, but remember, the bar doesn't start till about 1/2 inch behind the pad, depending on where you have your pad set. So our real support area starts right back here where we start making contact. So a little crack in front of the bar under the neoprene is fine. So I'm happy with this. Now let's move and look along the top line and see what we're seeing. Let's look along the bottom side of the bar. To do that, raise your skirting, take your fingers, and put the neoprene pad against the horse, and look at any gap that exists between the bar and the pad. So the slope of this horse is a little steeper than the slope of the bar. And while we're getting good contact along the top, we've got some voids along the bottom. These voids are pie shape or wedge shape. So we're going to pick a wedge shim out of our shim kit. That is the thickness at the bottom of the bar of that wedge, and we'll fill that in. So we get nice uniform contact from top to bottom along the bar. When you buy your new saddle, you get a shim kit. It includes 2 different thicknesses of wedge shims and 2 shim strips, an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch. In this case, I could see that the crack between the bar and the edge of the pad, we want to look at the distance between the bottom edge of this bar and the pad. And when we pushed the pad down to the horse, we could see that pad was about 1/2 an inch, maybe even 5/8. I'll take the thicker pair of wedge shims and I'll trim them to match this bar. Any kind of scissors will do. You can see I've got some big heavy duty ones I got at the hardware store here. Now when you're putting wedge shims on, don't ever put the top of them above the midline of this bar right here. They're only to be used in this lower part. You know, I've seen people stick them like that and you lose all your support here and below it. So the wedge shim, the top of it should never be above the midline of the bar. That you need. When I looked, I could see the void was about 1.5 inches, and it was about 1/2 inch here. So I'm going to put that right there to change that angle. I'm also going to take my smaller wedge, and I could see I had a void along the front of the bar. So I'm going to make a little round shape 3/8 inch thick wedge, and I'm going to put it right here on the bottom to give some more support here. Now our trees are molded with a little void here, and in order to, and our stirrup leathers are here, so I always take a, so that transitions evenly across that, and I get support in this section of the bar. So that's one of the first things to do on all saddles, is create a little piece shape like this that goes right there to fill that little void, flush without any protrusion. Now we'll do this on both sides. When you put your pads on, it's important to put them on the same at both sides. I use the leather of my skirting to line up the front of my pad. Okay, now let's take a look. Again, put some weight on the saddle. Looks real good now. Now to check my fit, I'll stand back, lift the saddle off the horse so I can see the space, slowly set the saddle down to where I can really see the shape and see that it's contacting the horse evenly, and see if we have any voids left. Okay, when I get the horse standing straight and I put a little weight, this gap that I saw before has largely disappeared. It's better to undershim than overshim. When you're filling the gap, if you've got a choice, pick a material that's slightly thinner than the gap. The neoprene will compress to accommodate it, and it'll mold in and fit. So overshimming can create a pressure spot, and we don't want that. So if your choice is to use 2 different sizes pads or shims, a little more room is better in most cases. I feel like a lot of people use these 1-inch pads on horses that aren't as thin as this, and they're really not creating the room that we need in the shoulders to avoid bridging and pressure in the loins or the shoulders, particularly